Hello listeners, and welcome to Plugged In, the energy news podcast from Montel, where we bring you the latest news, issues and changes happening in the energy sector. This week, we take a deep dive into German energy matters. And it's been a busy few weeks for the government in Berlin. We've seen announcements for its power plant strategy and also plans for a new industrial electricity price. There are many who think that energy prices are still too high, while demand remains too low. What are these changes and how will they affect German industry? Could there be other alternatives that would avoid locking in a fossil fuel future? In this episode, I'm going to be speaking to Claudia Kemfert from the German Institute for Economic Research. But first, I'm joined by Christian Sverrisson, who is editor of our German team. Welcome to the podcast, Christian.
Thank you, Richard.
It's been a while since we've had you on.
Definitely.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack here in terms of what's happening in Germany. It's certainly, as I said in the intro, it's been a very busy few weeks in Germany. Let's start with the government's plans for new power plants. What have the government announced, and how has the energy sector in Germany responded to this?
So what we are going to see over the next 2 years is tenders for new controllable capacity for the German power market. It's going to be 10 to 12 gigawatts. 8 gigawatts right away will be completely gas-fired power plants.
Okay, and how has the energy sector responded to that? Would you say, Christian? Has it been received positively or sort of meh?
The clear answer is it depends. It really depends on who you ask. You have some utilities that are ready to hit the ground running. They have all the permitting in place basically, and they can start constructing these power plants right away. But they are still waiting for the details to fall in place. And the German regulated BNA, who's responsible for drafting the tenders, cannot start drafting the tenders as long as everything is watertight and sealed. So this is what we are still waiting for. But they are happy that things are moving along and this discussion gained finally some momentum. On the other hand, we have critics who say Germany is going to lock itself into gas for far too long in the foreseeable future. And they also criticize the lack of technology neutrality in the tenders because they want to use other means to provide controllable generation capacity. But overall, I think most are happy that we are finally moving into a direction where we get more controllable generation capacity to back up intermittent renewables and also the German coal phase out.
So, as ever, the devil is always in the detail. So we've also seen Germany's Vice Chancellor and Finance Minister, Lars Klingbeil, say that he's confident that the EU will approve Germany's programme to implement a new industrial power price at the start of next year. This programme is estimated to cost between 3 and 5 billion euros. Can you explain what it is, how it will work, and why it's necessary for Germany?
Berlin and Brussels reached a preliminary agreement, but we still need to wait for all the details. But they are compliant with EU competition rules, so it looks like we're going to get a green light for Brussels. And basically, energy-intensive companies will get a limit to their power price at around 50 euros per megawatt hour, which is probably going to cost the German taxpayer around 3.1 billion euros. Berlin says we're going to do it in an unbureaucratic way, and it will be there for 3 years. But there's a catch. Companies will not see the money right away, but there is a built-in 1-year time lag for the first payout. So they start calculating next year, and the first money will only flow 2027.
Okay, that's it seems a little bit bureaucratic anyway, but yeah.
Germany after all.
Yeah, exactly. So how will this affect companies in Germany, Christian?
The big question is who actually benefits from this, because you cannot clash subsidies. There are some companies that already get subsidies for their carbon cost, the carbon component and the power generation costs, and they will probably not be eligible to get both at the same time. So for a few companies, this is probably going to help, but other companies will still feel like they are being left out in the cold, which is especially true for smaller and medium-sized businesses who don't have enough weight in this whole discussion to actually get the subsidies that they want or need. So this is why we are hearing about this deindustrialization topic in Germany all the time, because industry has been suffering from higher energy prices for quite a while now, and it just doesn't seem to go down.
Seems a bit unfair as well that only the large companies, not the smaller ones, get the benefits.
When the coalition came up with their coalition agreement, they actually promised to lower power prices for everyone in Germany, not only industrials, but also households. And they so far haven't delivered on this promise. And this is something they're being heavily criticized for quite a while now. And now with this whole discussion about the industrial power price, everything comes back to the surface again, where many people just demand lower power prices altogether. So some are happy, others obviously are not.
Christian, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Well, let's bring in this week's expert who can tell us more about the significance of these announcements. I'm pleased to be joined by Claudia Kemfert, Professor of Energy Economics and Energy Policy at Leuphana University, Professor of Energy Economics and Energy Policy at Leuphana University Lüneburg, and Head of the Energy, Transportation and Environment Department at the German Institute for Economic Research. A warm welcome back to the podcast, Claudia.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here.
Perfect. I think, Claudia, I'd like to start off by talking about the energy sector more generally in Germany. What's the sentiment like at the moment? Is there sort of impatience with the new government or generally more broader support?
Mm-hmm. I would say the sentiment is mixed and most often ambivalent, if I could say that way. So many appreciate the governments, also the crisis management, also during the last energy crisis, and also what we have seen in the past, the LNG rollout, and also the strong momentum for renewables. But at the same time, we see that more and more companies, I would say, are increasingly frustrated also by slow government decisions or not fast enough. What the government said that they would be early changes made, and that's not happening. So they are still slow permitting, they are regulatory zigzagging, and I would say also a lack of coherent long-term strategy. So the sector sees the potential, I would say, of the Energiewende or the energy transition, and there's confidence in the overall directions that remains high. But what is missing is reliability in implementation, and businesses need stable frameworks and long-term signals, and a regulatory environment that reduces complexity and not increases complexity. So the reduction of complexity is really important. And this is what also the current government said. There is an autumn of reforms, and that's not really happening at the moment.
I'm sure we'll return to some of these issues, Claudia, but I want to talk about a little bit of a hot topic at the moment in Germany, which is the industry and industrial power price. Now, obviously, industry is vital for Germany, as it is for German industry. It's very important for all of Europe. But energy-intensive industries in the country have been struggling with high energy costs and versus global competitors. And the German government had said it was aimed to lower the cost of power to as little as 50 euros per megawatt hour from 1st of January next year. What's your view of this?
Well, we see this industrial power price that will not solve the problems. In fact, it, to my opinion, risks creating new ones, actually. So that's some kind of subsidizing electricity consumption that never does really address the real structural changes which are needed. What we need more are an increasing share of renewables. We need PPAs, so purchase power agreements, so direct contracts with the renewable energy companies. We need more electrification. We have outdated processes. We have limited efficiency, and really a slow, smart, decentralized grid expansion, and also administrative hurdles. So we have an international market which is struggling. And all this creates difficulties to energy-intensive companies. And the industries already face a lot of exemptions or have exemptions. And there's an additional one which is not really solving the structure changes, which we really need. We are now subsidizing industrial freeze prices, or subsidize industrial freeze the prices. And the old system is not modern enough. And it rewards also energy intensity rather than innovation. So it creates also fairness issues, to my view. So the small and medium-sized companies, many of which are already investing heavily also in energy efficiency and also electrification, they are not benefiting, and that's not fair. I say that's also unfair. And also largest consumers like households receive also not these kind of discounts. So there's a fairness issue as well. But I would say the strongest point is that we really need a higher share of renewables immediately, and instead of this industrial prices, that's really not solving the issues.
So you're opposed to this measure then, this move and this legislative proposal, Claudia?
Yeah, well, no, yeah, opposing, it's not really what I would really favor. So we have so many issues, as I said, and this is what we really need urgently are this structural programs, or I mean, these energy-intensive companies need to modernize, and they are not modernizing enough. And by subsidizing a price or subsidizing consumption, we could say, that's not really solving it. What we really need is more modernization and subsidizing the transformation, the decarbonization. All of this is really necessary. And here we could put subsidies to help the companies, but freezing the price for 3 years. And what is then? What is after the subsidy? So the problems are then the same. So it's not solving at all any of these kinds of problems we have.
No, so you mentioned PPAs and stimulating the demand for PPAs. How can the government get involved here, Claudia, do you think, to incentivize maybe the growing uptick in PPAs? There's been a bit of stagnation in the PPA market in recent months.
Exactly, and that should be increased. I mean, we need these kind of alternatives and helping the industry to transform. So there could be a support for the transformation by these long-term renewable power contracts. So probably also by a framework which standardizes the PPAs for small, medium enterprises, for example, or in addition to that, also the contracts for difference, which my institute also is really offering or supporting several times, also for strategic technologies that could give companies also predictable prices without permanent subsidies. And here the government could put the framework for this and helping this to get transparent environment for this. Yeah, but also the transformation support itself. So via clear climate goals and the investment aids also for the transformation, for the electrified processes, for anything that is needed, for heat pumps, e-boilers, and all this, and support for green hydrogen as well. But you're right, the PPAs, there's a stagnation, so we need a standardization for it and also a transparent support. By this could be done by a framework, but also by clear signals to an increase of renewables. And that is not, I mean, the current decisions does not help at all for this kind of contracts.
So you mentioned, increasing the share of renewables there, Claudia. Does that need to be turbocharged? And are we talking onshore wind, solar, offshore, or everything?
Yeah. We need a turbo. I like this word. So we need a 3 times higher, steeper increase of solar and wind, 3 or 4 times turbo than before. So faster approvals for renewables. We need this smart grids, decentralized grids. We need more storage, which now is becoming a better framework by the most recent decisions, also by the government, which is not too bad, to get all the battery storage also into the system. But the faster approvals are important, and digitalization needs to be mentioned, electrifications of everything, and clear deadlines. The procedures need to be improved, and the processes improve, the costs, also the structural costs needs to be reduced. So they need, some kind of market reform that promotes the flexibility instead of the fixed demand. So demand responses are important. In real time is important as well. Support for storage, hybrid renewable parks, and all the flexibility system that needs support, that reduces the volatility and also the industrial risk. So at the end, we need this kind of flexibility into the market. Yeah.
The German grid is famously there are famous bottlenecks, certainly from north to south, but there are also massive bottlenecks in the queues for access to the grid, and also for accessing, for batteries to come on board, for example. How can you speed that up so you fast track the permitting process, Claudia? How can you do that in practice?
Yeah, now the most recent decisions by the government to get the battery storage faster into the system by also reducing the whole process and the permit process, and to get it more transparent and faster, that helps now in improving and also steeping the process up, or speeding the process up. That is really important for the flexibility. As you said, the bottlenecks in the grid are also on the decentralized level. The more electric cars we will have in the system, the more heat pumps, also decentralized heat pumps, including the batteries. The batteries could help to improve the decentralized grid bottlenecks, and increase the flexibility here by, the procedures need to be faster, and the processes can be speed up by also having a clear procedures and transparent processes. And now the most recent decisions, it helps a lot, I think, in order to bring the battery storages into the system, and that will bring also more flexibility, and it should compete to this fossil world the government wants to maintain with more fossil gas power plants also, but the flexibility is more key than that. And I think we will see a faster decision processes by grid authorities to improve to increase the battery in the system. Yeah,
I think that would certainly help, and that kind of fast track process will increase the uptake of batteries into the system. But I just want to come back to what you said about contracts for difference, or CFDs as they're called, Claudia. I know that your institute's done some work on that. Could you just explain to our listeners what's on the table, or what's being proposed here? Because it's talking about two-sided versus one-sided CFDs. How does that work?
Yeah. Just one comment also, as you said, what is needed also for renewable increase. I just wanted to mention that still the projects still take too long, not to be misunderstood. So we really need more digital procedures and fewer redundant steps and so on, clear priorities. That is what I wanted to say, in order to get also the municipalities that to get their direct financial benefits out of it. Yes, the PPA, not the PPAs you mentioned, the contracts for difference. So that is for companies to very attractive, I think, to get a certain price, a fixed price for a certain project when it's too expensive, or vice versa. They have to pay back also the revenues if the price is lower, and one-sided means that's I'm not sure whether I can explain that very good in my words, is when you have a certain company that gets a certain price for a project will be benefit by this contracts for difference, or two sides means. Now, I'm not quite sure whether I can explain that correctly. Probably in English you can do that better than me.
No problem. I think it's clearly that it works on a different level. It's a contract with the government, so the government agrees a certain payment if the price goes above a certain level, and the companies need to pay it back if it goes below. I think those are the crucial elements there, Claudia. I think we don't need to go into any more detail than that. But these would obviously target sort of small and medium-sized businesses? Would that be a way of getting them involved?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, especially the small and medium-sized companies can get involved both by standardized PPAs, but also for these contracts for difference, where you have an investment incentive and get a certain, also the planning security for a certain project, which is needed here for those companies, and reduce also the process complexities. I think that could balance the market and also balance also demand responses and the storage options in order to reduce these bottlenecks, as you mentioned, and also price spikes which could happen. And this contracts for difference balance all this better, and brings indeed the small and medium-sized companies into the system in order that they can also avoid high CO2 price or high costs related to that, and get better incentives for investments than without. So I would say yes, especially for SMEs, it's attractive, this kind of system. Yeah.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Claudia, and we have discussed this before when you've been on the podcast, is the German government's plans for new gas plants. I think I think it's intending to tender up to 10 gigawatts, if I'm not mistaken. What are your views here?
Well, I'm very skeptical, but I know that's my personal view. Still, I'm still very skeptical, because I think yes, flexible backup capacity can be useful also in a renewable-based system, but the way Germany is now approaching this 10 gigawatt tender carries also risks, because the key concern I have is that the tender could discriminate against other flexibility options, and those I mentioned already before, like battery storage, or also demand-side responses, hybrid renewable energy parks, or yes, also district heating flexibility or other interconnectors. So these options can often provide the same system services with lower costs and lower emissions and higher innovation potential. And if there are fossil, as I call it, fossil gas turbines that also stick to this fossil path, which we don't want to have anymore, as it creates emissions. And of course, if the gas turbines are filled with so-called sustainable biomass, it might be an alternative as well. Instead of fossil gas, or hydrogen ready. That could also be more than a label if we would have really green hydrogen in the future. So if the tender should be really, it should be technological neutral. It's a word the Germans love, Technologieoffenheit, so technology neutral. So focusing really on delivering flexibility at the lowest system cost. If the storage and also other options like demand responses are also included, I think it could be efficient, and it could also be they can compete in equal terms. So that's more than just this flexible backup capacity, and we will see how fast and how many of these gas-fired power plants are really constructed. So because hydrogen ready is not really happening, it's more or less sustainable biomass, which might be of interest. And the design must ensure that these plants do not undermine renewables and flexibility markets and storage, which is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, would the other case be that perhaps, the case against batteries and storage, that the technology can't still provide the level of power for a sustained period? Say if there is, a sustained period of very low winds, then the storage can't do it in the same way that a gas-fired plant could.
Yeah, I mean, for certain hours of a year, it might so, but only in the future where we really have 80 or 85% of renewables in the system, not now, where we have all this reserve capacities and we are full of reserve capacity. But in the future, yes, but I would also say we have heat storage options, which could also offer longer times, or yes, hydrogen in the future, which we don't have right now, but in the future we will have, could offer the same. So I'm a bit more skeptical only because of this large number of fossil gas-fired power plants. But 10 gigawatt is much better than 20. So I'm not but I'm still a bit of skeptical only because of the competition against other storage and flexibility options.
Absolutely, and it may prevent those options coming into the market if you can always fall back onto fossil gas plants, I suppose. But would a capacity mechanism or a reserve system a strategic reserve be better, do you think?
Yes, exactly. Our institute has critics against this capacity market at the moment because it would subsidize also fossil capacities, which is quite expensive. And they did a study also on comparing the costs of the alternatives of this capacity market, comparing to a security of supply reserve, which we think is enough at the moment, which is a reserve which we already have at the moment, but with different kind of capacity reserves, which come into the market when they are needed. And this reserve could be extended in the future and should be also, open to all kind of alternatives in meaning of reserve. But the capacity market itself, a full capacity market at the moment, would also distort the market, would discriminate flexibility options, and would more support the fossil capacities, which is not what we should do at the moment.
No, and that's the direction of travel which the government has certainly clearly said it will go towards. But a final question, Claudia, if I may. If you you work in academia, you see a lot of students, you have done in the past. How would you mark this government? So if you were to mark this government, give this government a mark out of 10, what would you give it? 10 being the highest.
10 is highest. Oh, that's yes. It's easier for students to mark actually than the government. So we're not in school, but they are not really performing very well at the moment, I have to admit. Although I always want to be very positive and always want to motivate students by not providing too low marks. But here I would say it's not higher than a 5. It's more 4 or 5.
So plenty of work to do, especially on the speed and the urgency of meeting the energy transition. Claudia, it's always a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you very much for joining the Plugged In Energy News podcast this week.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a great pleasure. I'm looking forward to the next time. Thank you.
And you listeners, thanks for listening to this episode of Plugged In. If you enjoyed this discussion, please like, rate, and follow to make sure you get the latest podcast episodes as soon as we release them every Friday. We'd also love to read your reviews of the podcast. It helps us to keep up to date with what you, our listeners, think of our podcast and what content you want to receive more of. Finally, you can head to montelnews.com for more news and analysis from our team of journalists across Europe and beyond. See you next time.